on Monday after the show, which was perfect because we had to sit for 48 hours without being able to react to it, UFC president...
Really? Wait, look. I'm surprised you didn't react to it on your personal channel. Would have been a great time, right? I mean, really.
Don't think I didn't consider it. But actually, the reason why I didn't was because I was not featured in it, and I thought the guy who is my partner, he should probably get the first word. So just to set it up here very quickly, Dana White, UFC president, put out a video, looked like a political campaign ad in terms of its styling on Monday afternoon on Twitter. It got some decent traction, I thought, some pretty widespread awareness. People who liked it are the ones who basically don't take coronavirus seriously. People who didn't would be the MMA media. But in it, he slanders MMA media, attacks them, and says they were critics, then they were wrong all along in terms of the UFC's ambitions during the coronavirus. BC, you were featured, I would hate to say this, prominently in this, which is fucking hilarious because you lightly criticized them maybe a handful of times. You mostly supported what they were trying to do, and they nevertheless chucked you right under that bus. What do you got to say, sir?
Look, I'm the MVP of that video. I guess, no headlines or bad press in this case, right? It's all good in the end. It's amazing the emotions you get in the 24-hour period after this. Like, this is a freaking joke, right? Like, first of all, because I'm not the guy. I mean, look, you were texting me that day. My phone's blowing up. I'm at Walmart trying to buy stocking stuffers. My phone's blowing up. Luke's like, I wasn't even in that shit at all. You should be the enemy, Dr. Fauci. But instead, it was me. And look, sadly, it was our guy, Brandon Wise from CBS Sports, the fine Kombat editor who had joined me on a couple podcasts pre-Luke Morning Kombat merger. And I think all of this is pulled from like the one episode back in the Tachi Palace disaster where us and everyone else was like, God, what's going on with Dana here? He's out of control. So look, all right, I know what you want me to do, right? You want me to come out here and be like, fuck Mob Deep, fuck Zuffa Boxing, fuck Dana White as a label and a crew. Don't one of y'all got sickle cell or something? I know you want me to do that, right? And I have, by the way, researched how other people in the past have responded to being unfairly attacked by Dana White. So, last warning, this is not how Eskimo brothers should talk to one another, Dana. But look, the reality is very overblown here, Luke. You talk about fake news, and this is essentially what Dana White's trying to do, right? Almost Trumpian in this way.
Let me interrupt you very quickly. It's not essentially fake news. It's straight up fake news, but go ahead.
Yeah, so he's responding to fake news with fake news. Dana White's still pissed at whoever wrote that New York Times piece, right? And he's pissed that somebody apparently called the governor of California right ahead of the Tachi Palace disaster, and some people think that led directly to Disney, Governor Newsom, ESPN being like, stand down. Well, here's the deal.
And also Senator Dianne Feinstein out of California as well. But yeah.
And that may be all connected, and he can hate that one person, that's fine. But like, everybody, rightfully so, ahead of the Tachi Palace fight, which if you don't remember the timeline, it was the original UFC 249 card. Dana was trying to rush it out when all 50 states commissions had said no live events, no sporting events. So do you want to talk about when was that the right time to question him? Of course, to make matters even worse. Dana's saying none of us use facts and we're just trying to go clickbaity. Do you remember Dana White's response during that window? It was, I'm not telling you guys anything. I don't owe the media anything. We were reaching out to him, trying to understand the protocol of what the testing would look like, knowing that it was controversial that the UFC's last card pre-quarantine in March in Brasilia did not have COVID testing and somewhat controversially went on. And of course, Jacare, we've been down that road before. Was that the right season to question Dana White, in which somebody pulled out of context from my State of Combat podcast, RIP, me using the word reckless? Yeah, that was a pretty reckless time, if you ask me, Luke. And by the way, somebody pointed this out on our CBS team. Shout out to whatever low-level UFC video editor where Dana got on the phone was like, get on Campbell's podcast and find that out. They had to swim through them dick jokes to find that, okay? So shout out to whoever that person was, who pulled Brandon Wise out of the stack and put him up like a mugshot along next to me, okay?
It's like the scene from South Park where Cartman is trying to show, what's his face? Chat roulette. And he's like, there's a guy jacking off, there's a guy jacking off, there's a guy jacking off. Sorry, go ahead.
So look, I'm not the enemy because I questioned Dana like everybody else during that season. But like everybody else, I said, once you get this approved by a state commission and we can do it the right way with transparency and testing, I'm all for somebody being first, somebody clearing the way. And I don't know if you remember, Luke, early in Morning Kombat in the quarantine, when you were somewhat rightfully like, oh my God, what are they doing? I brought up the question and said, hey, Luke, is there a chance that Dana could end up being a hero during the quarantine if he can pull this off? And you were like, well, no. In some ways he has. I owe a lot of my 2020 and the success of this show and my bottom line and me being able to go to Walmart and afford Christmas gifts to Dana getting out there and making this happen, which is why I've spent most of this calendar year saying this guy is, the quarantine MVP. I don't say that in a Robbie Barstool type of way or a Schmo or anybody else. I'm just like, look, that's the facts. Why was I nailed in this? Probably, Luke, because you heard that Bob Arum sound in that. That Bob Arum sound came from my interview with Bob early in the quarantine. I wrote a story on it. So this is where Dana was actually right. He said, the media is just clickbaity. Yeah, that's a clickbait move. If Bob Arum comes on your podcast and calls Dana White, an arrogant asshole, your website's probably going to write that story. I put my byline on that story. That's probably why I was looked at as a villain or a threat, when in reality, I had Dana White. I interviewed him on CBS Sports HQ the month after that. Not only did we get on great, I challenged him. He answered my questions. I got messages from UFC PR after that interview saying, Dana loved it. You challenged him, but you were fair, blah, blah, blah. So I don't need to, clean my name and prove it. I did feel bad for, Alexander K. Lee, all these, dudes who are good guys in our business who are just like, idiot, loser, whatever. Like,
I'm surprised you didn't call any of them virgins. Virgin.
Yeah. What have you ever accomplished? Like, this is the most, like, how do I fight fake news? Let me just put on the most aggrandizing, you talked about it on Twitter. No prominent features of fighters who were the ones who were, risking everything. Not enough about the UFC staff, by the way. PR, everything, top to bottom. They've been great. I love those people. They've helped us out, whatever. They have had a great year. This was all about Dana. Nobody can prove me wrong. Nobody can hold me back. And again, I'm somebody that respects what Dana ultimately pulled off. But was this a ridiculous low blow? Could you imagine David Stern or Adam Silver or, Paul Tagliabue or Bud Selig or something doing something like this? No, you couldn't. Maybe that's going to always be the difference between MMA and this, but I'm not going to come out here and drop bombs and say that Dana would still be a cardio kickboxing coach in Boston in his late 40s if it wasn't for Lorenzo. Not going to do stuff like that.
Yeah,
but
we're
Dana,
definitely not going to say that out loud, yes.
But Dana, I'm not your enemy. Do you know what your enemy is, Dana? You got a big enemy over there in Waikiki, Hawaii, right? Wapana Beach, whatever you call it. How do you pronounce that, Luke, from that Beach Boys song?
Waikiki, Y&I, something, I don't know.
Y&I Beach. Remember that cliff that you stood at the top of? All right, Dana, let's pause this conversation real quick. Remember in that video where you where you roasted me and you said nobody at UFC lost their job during 2020. You know who did lose their job? Rachel Ostovich. You know who jumped off that cliff on that video at Wapana Beach? Rachel Ostovich. So shout out to her. Shout out to that. I'm not your enemy. Your enemy is that cliff that you bitched out on, or the mafia that banged on your door that time trying to get money and you ran and started the UFC. Great life, great career, Dana. I love you, but I'm not your guy. All right. So that's what I got to say. All right.
That's
what
funny.
else you want?
That's funny. Yeah. I mean, it's all. I almost question about whether or not it's even worth saying anything, because it is. The answer is yes, it is. But look, there's a group of people that are not going to look into any of the claims that he makes. And even if you do look into the claims that he makes, which I did, I had a long Twitter thread, but I went through every single article that he lists in that video. And literally one of them is from Brian Campbell from June, and it has the word epidemic in the headline. But it actually has nothing to do with the coronavirus or the UFC's handling of the coronavirus. It has to do with stars wanting more money. And they just threw it in there and then threw Brian
Luke,
under the bus.
Pause on that. Remember that same week that John Jones, Conor McGregor, and Henry Cejudo all announced their retirement. So I wrote a obvious reaction column like,
right.
UFC's got to figure out this fighter pay thing. I think in that story, I actually praised Dana's handling of the previous few months. It's ridiculous.
And I think actually I went back and reread it, and what you had argued was basically that, like, listen, money is going to be hard to come by. And you and I debated whether or not that was true, but that is not an anti-UFC position. Far from it. It's actually quite sympathetic to the situation that they were facing at the time, or at least that's certainly one I think reasonable interpretation of it. But I mean, here is the basic point. Like, if you're open to the idea that evidence matters, you should keep listening. If you're not open to the idea that evidence matters, then you can go ahead and downvote this and you can say that this is all nonsense. I'm not the guy for you. But if what you actually care about is what the truth is, then I encourage you to have just 2 minutes of patience with me. I don't care, for the most part, what people believe in this world, okay? Sometimes you believe things because that's what you were taught. Sometimes you believe things because you learned it that way. Sometimes you believe things because you learned something a certain way and then you were convinced otherwise. But if you believe something, and in particular, if you really strongly believe something, you should be able to argue on behalf of that. The funny thing about this video that he put out is that rather than actually showing that the journalists were wrong, it actually does the opposite. And what is so cowardly about the video is that he doesn't even have the willingness to run on the actual record. So let's talk about the record for just a second if we can. Here is the record. In the second week of March, virtually every sport globally, certainly in North America, had shut down. Okay, the March Madness canceled. NBA, indefinitely suspended. NHL, MLS, you can go down the list. Following all of that, the UFC still went down to Brasilia, which, by the way, was having its own issues closing everything down. And they still did a card, and they did no COVID testing for it. Dana White goes on ESPN and tries to justify, by the way, those ESPN anchors at the time, total cowards, never brought up the lack of COVID testing. Dana defends it by saying we always go above and beyond. And when it comes to things at that point, not including COVID, that is certainly true. But they held a show when the rest of the world shut down without COVID testing. Okay? Let's just be absolutely clear about that. Then you can go and they doubled back on it. They had a show in London that he had told Aaron Bronsteter they were still going to do. When Bronsteter asked if they were going to do COVID testing, he did not answer the question. Then they try and go to do the show at the Tachi Palace where they said they would not reveal what the safety protocol was. Just trust us. We're not going to reveal what the location is. At this point, the Association of Ringside Physicians had said there is no event that should happen. California was not only shut down, the commission, for April, but also all of May. New Jersey shut down, and I believe Nevada was shut down. There was no existing commission protocol on how to handle COVID. Kevin Draper of the New York Times eventually puts out an article that I think got the attention of Gavin Newsom, Dianne Feinstein, whatever happens. They make a call to Disney. Disney and ESPN shut them down. After that, I put out a video on May 4th when the UFC decided that they were going to go to Florida. They were going to work with the commission. Eventually, the New York Times had published their safety protocol. The UFC had then gone back to the Association of Ringside Physicians and said, we want to work with you on this to get you a better understanding of what we're trying to do. Then Association of Ringside Physicians puts out a note saying, okay, it can happen, but only under the strictest guidelines. They do the Florida show. You can make an argument that the Florida show then helped precipitate the return to Nevada, but Nevada upped the level of stringent, let's say, protocol, and then Fight Island on top of that. You want to ask what the journalists were saying. They were saying if you're going to do a test in London or Brazil during the middle of a pandemic when the rest of the world is shut down, you might want to do COVID testing. And in fact, in the video, they bragged that they had done 28,000 COVID tests. Well, I can tell you that doesn't count UFC Brasilia because there was a whopping 0 at that event. It only starts after that fact. It only takes place once the criticisms and the public pressure force change upon them to work with a state actor.
Great point.
And then to have transparency about what they were doing.
I'm going to give it right back to you, but your point is right. You know what the media ultimately did? Forced Dana to do what he did, which was put the right testing and sanctioning in to make it work. If it wasn't for media pressure and checking in, which is their job, to ask questions and report, I mean, it's so ridiculous. Does he really want us all to be like schmoing it? And I love the schmo, by the way. He's great. But you get what I'm saying right here, okay?
I'm just saying, here's what the record shows. All that criticism, and you can look at my thread on Twitter, all of those things he points out, they all come from that March, April, and then a few of them, one of them, which, by the way, BC, they included Jay Mariotti calling Dana a snake. Okay, I do not think Dana is a snake. And also, who gives a fuck what Jay Mariotti thinks?
Yeah.
The most irrelevant figure in all of media. So they put this out, include it as part of this broader thing. You notice when the criticism stops. It stops when they worked with Nevada, when the safety protocol was public, when everything was transparent. It stopped because what are you going to complain about at that point? All media was asking for was wait until a major commission has put together protocol, follow it, and then we can be done. That's it. That is all they ever asked for. The Florida show was a little bit gray because I'm guessing that the UFC did the majority, if not all, of the heavy lifting and coming with a protocol, and Florida rubber stamped it. But when the state rubber stamped it, they are now on the hook for its safety to a degree as well. It adds an imprimatur of sanctioning that going to Tachi Palace while the California Commission is shut down doesn't have. So, like, in the end, it's like, dude, did the UFC have a good year? Yes, God fucking bless them. It means the rest of us had a pretty good year for the most part as well.
Damn
There were
right.
some media layoffs as well. I take note, once they went to Nevada, the criticisms all stopped. All they wanted you to do was, hey, you talked about running towards regulation for 10 years. You gotta keep doing that. I know it's difficult. We know that you have to get a certain amount of shows in to get the money from ESPN. You had to reach a certain amount of inventory, and losing those weeks fucking sucks. We know, but we're asking in the middle of a pandemic when we don't know anything is still go to a state commission with a state commission that has updated protocol. If that makes journalists bad, well, then it makes journalists fucking bad. I don't expect applause to do my job, and nobody else should either.
And like no slander at his ESPN Disney bosses for the actual reason he got shut down. But, then he destroyed Ariel. And, we don't talk about Ariel a lot on this show, but, like, I get that they've had a bad history, but he pulled Ariel's comment completely out of context when Ariel was actually being fair and, like, almost complimentary of them. I mean, it's ridiculous. Look, some people texted me hilariously that this was like a Scientology training video or whatever, propaganda, Russian propaganda video. It kind of takes his awful video. Remember when he went after Loretta Hunt like 10 years ago and just dropped it kind of takes that video off the hook for the moment. But your thread you had on Twitter, I thought rightfully just nailed it in terms of just like picking such a small pocket of criticism and making it as, everyone held me back. When the reality is he just pulled people that doubted him initially. And you know who doubted him initially? Joe frickin' Rogan. I put that video out on Twitter. I ended up taking it down, Luke, only because my mentions became a MAGA graveyard of zombies tracking me down. But, Joe Rogan was the guy who was like, I don't know how they're going to pull it off, and I'm not going to be there if they do. That was all of us, by the way. I thought it was largely hilarious the whole way, but I did, to be honest, people hit me up going, oh, you're crying. Stop crying. You're salty. I got salty when I went on Instagram and saw the victory lap that all celebrities were taking. Tom Brady, Shane Victorino commenting, being like, yeah, Dana, get him. Like, yeah, our hero. When it got to that level, Luke, I started to get a little angry about how I was being characterized there. But,
listen, we're all just relitigating COVID again. There's a bunch of people during that time that didn't understand what the big deal is about COVID and why did they have to stop shows. It's like, dude, if you're going to brag you did 28,000 COVID tests, which is a fuck ton, which came as an enormous inconvenience and expense, I completely get it. But if you're going to brag about it and you're mad about the criticism that came when you did not do that, there's a problem. If you are going to make an argument about your success, make it about the facts. Run on the record. And the criticism comes from all of the things he did before the changes. All of the success he notes, last thing on this, BC, all of the success he notes comes from after the changes. You're welcome.
Yeah, Dana, you can do what you want. I don't need Tom Brady and Shane Victorino dunking on me, all right? So get off my porch on that. And also, look, if you're going to, like, spell our name right at least. If you're going to shade me, put some Morning Kombat up there. Get Luke Fauci up there. We don't need no State of Combat. Don't fall in love with a podcast that no longer exists, Dana, all right? That's not even a thing anymore.
How bitter were you that I didn't get absolutely crushed in that video?
I wasn't. I felt like you were almost like, damn, like, didn't I do anything to get a mention here? I mean, you were the guy that was straight up opposing anyone coming back for right or wrong. And I'm not slandering you. How did I become the poster boy for this? What the hell's going on here?
Because I mean, I don't know. I don't want to read into someone's motivations. I can't tell. I mean, I'd be speculating, but I'll just say it's like, dude, this is why you can't win in media, right? This is the last thing I'll say. Either we have three choices. Right? So one is you can just be totally against them at all times and blah, blah, blah. That's a choice you can make. You can try and be in between, which is sometimes I'll praise them, like when they made those changes. Dude, after they made those changes, they fucking killed it. They absolutely killed it. There's no denying that they killed it, and good for them. it makes it better for the industry worldwide. We're going to talk about them being on ABC. That's amazing. Or, but you could mix it with some of the things they did before that, which was totally out of line. Or you can just bootlick the whole time. But it just goes to show, unless you bootlick, unless you are absolutely reflexively kind to them at all times, there's no safe place for you to be. It doesn't really exist. So I'll just say this. He talks about, the video talks about negativity on the media side. You know, one thing that doesn't get mentioned in the video is there's no thanks to the fighters. There's no thanks to the coaches who had, you know, older people in their homes or people who had immunocompromised conditions, and they still, through quarantines and lockdowns, still have to go out there sometimes training in garages or training in shutdown gyms. No one ever thanked them for making the year happen. So I will do what Dana did not do in that video, and I will say thanks to the fighters and the coaches and everyone else in those gyms who took risks upon themselves, in many cases got COVID, just to make sure that the train stayed on the tracks. We salute you.
Right, and he could have done this video so much softer, and we would have been like, you know what? Take your victory lap. You deserve it. But instead, just throwing such unnecessary darts. I know that because we benefit and survive in some ways off of the UFC being in business is like yelling at Santa Claus, right, for like taking a nip out of the bar on his way back up the chimney. But it is like that. So shout out to you for that Twitter thread. Shout out to Ben Folks of The Athletic this morning for putting out a fact-check piece, just really assaulting that whole thing and taking it out. But, I mean, look, it's like reality at the end of the day. Dana the whole time was like, this has nothing to do with money. It did have to do with money. The parent company's not getting the $750 million, Luke, from ESPN for the guaranteed minimum of shows unless they do what they have to do to get all those shows on the air. Credit to Dana. He figured it out. He didn't give up and put his head in the sand. He kind of did, because he went to Abu Dhabi and then he pounded some sand. But you get the point, Luke. He made it happen, but don't try to act like you did it out of the kindness of your heart. The fighters did it because they have no other income. You did it because the parent company, Endeavor, would die without this $750 million. So just be transparent about the whole freaking thing, and we can all move on. Good Lord.
That's it. I don't have anything else to say. Any final thoughts, or is that the final thought, BC?
You old bitch. I'm going into your playbook here, all right?
TV taught me how to dream. It was a life jacket. I don't think you can be an artist and not touch people.